welcome everybody. A little kind of, we'll start off with a little reminder of this, you know, uh, this presentation on managing lost time. Nothing is really new here. This is just really my version of, what we did through the 80s and 90s, and it was called technical limit drilling, managing the best of the best, Sigma 6, lean engineering, whatever you want to call it. It's just common sense to have much safer, more effective and efficient drilling operations. But let's remind ourselves of the mismanagement of lost time, of recent well events, of Macondo, where we lost $60 billion on one well. So many things went wrong that 11 people ended up losing their lives. And as an industry, we really lost our reputation. So why do multiples of non-injury accident well events still result? Because that's what they are. This is how I define them. Things that go wrong in wells are accidents. And most safety systems and other industries, that's exactly how they see them. So how do we resolve these? Where are the well reports for these? What assurances exist, to ensure that we're doing any better? And like I said, I've actually noticed on this go-to meeting format that there is a feature here for questions and polls and chat as well. But for the purpose of this webinar, we'll just keep everything in the chat, and we can get a copy of the chat log and pick anything up. So any comments you have, please use the chat log and put them in. So I quickly put 7 questions together today on incidents and accidents, and I've actually put this into the chat log. So, at some point in time, please feel free to feed back to me on these questions. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but these are the relevant questions. So wells, incidents and accidents. So how do you define these within your organization? How do they result? What perpetuates an incident or an accident? What accident models are you using? In fact, there's about 32 different accident models. So do you even know what you're using? Put your comments in the chat log. What percentage of industrial accidents are personally injury related? So I've given you a pick of 4 here. How many personal injury accidents get reported and investigated? Pick one of these options. What percentage of industrial accidents are non-injury related? Pick one of these options. How many non-injury well accidents get reported and investigated? Pick one of these options. And how erroneous is non-productive time, which is typically the oil field metric mantra, that we use and apply in well operations programs and projects. So pick one of these. So, for the attendees that are here, it'd be interesting to get your feedback on this. And this managing lost time is going to kind of answer these questions based on evidence. So the purpose of this webinar is this is what I concluded after 42 years. You have to get people to think differently, because if you don't think differently, you have no. It's a human factor. You're going to have no inclination or requirement to change. And the second thing is you will see, based on the evident facts that I will show, we need to develop a much better strategy for well management. And I've got what I call my C principles, and we have to initiate some new things within our current systems. I'm not saying we need to rewrite the book, but we need to look at our current systems, and we need to make some incremental and some radical change to them. And the main message is this: is you have to just use the evidence. It's all in the evidence, and you can remain in self-denial all you want, but the evidence that I will show in this presentation is real, it's evident, and it's true. And as an industry, we don't stick to these 3 simple principles. Thankfully, we have real-time advisory services now, which tells us the truth anyway. So you can't hide from the truth today like we did in the past, because everything is being recorded. So the real evident truth is all getting recorded now. So we need a better, smarter way to change. So it's about getting people to think to change. And if we can change, then we can learn, and by the way, learning is not enough. And we'll discuss that as well, why learning is not enough. But if you can learn, then you can grow the business and we can improve, basically. So I'm a driller and I apply managing lost time solely in drilling. But when I thought about this, the metrics I use within drilling, we can use in any well project throughout the life cycle of the well. So the little illustration in the lower slide here, we have different projects through the life cycle of a well. We explore, we appraise, we develop, we test, we do development wells, and then we start producing, and then we do well servicing, and we do interventions and workovers and abandonment at the very end. So all these well projects, in my view, we can apply exactly the same metrics which I have used in drilling for the last 20 years in any aspect of the well. But because I'm a driller, the examples I'm going to show you are from drilling. But the reality is you can use the same kind of logic and rationale in any aspect of a well's life cycle. So the first question, and again, you can feel free to use the chat log. So where are all our wells lost incident accidents reports that exist? And this is the problem number one. In my 42 years, I have rarely ever been involved in accident incident reporting. And yet I've seen hundreds of major well events result through my career. So this is the problem. Don't tell me we investigate all our wells incidents, because in my experience, and I've worked in a lot of places in the world for a lot of operators, the standard norm is we do not. And I'll give you the evident facts why this is so. So that's the first thing here. So why is managing time, lost time so important? Because the world we live in just now, everything is wanting us to be safer, more efficient, more effective, more sustainable, more green. The generation today have far more monkeys on their back. But the key thing is we want to operate at reduced well costs, because you can see the little our principal metrics of oil and gas is time is money. And when we're not producing oil and making money, every single facet of managing a well is about time and money. But we also have to base this on, it's not about the cheapest bidder or how fast you can do something, because ultimately it comes down to the quality. And then we're living in a world of health, safety, and environment. We have to balance these metrics in with this. So it's quite complex. It's sometimes we can go fast and cheap. Other times we have to go slow and spend money because quality might be the issue. So the principles are simple, but we know there's so much happening is what makes it a little bit more complex. So but the key thing is, and the message in this, you're not going to learn from your successes. You're going to learn far more about your failures and the things that are going wrong within your business, the loss, the risk, and the uncertainties that will likely result. And we have to be able to, once the evidence will show us there is a mountain of loss and waste that exists within wells drilling, and I'm pretty sure the same exists within other well operational aspects. The next step is how can we resolve all these well lost time events that result. And a simple kind of illustration here to show what is driving a well through the life cycle. And it's all about, no matter what we're doing, we're trying to do it as at the lowest cost, to give us, at the lowest cost, at the lowest risk, to give us the biggest return on our investment, basically. So where lie our wells challenges? So today, with all the things that are going on, are we more confused? Are we lost? Are we unsure, unclear, perplexed, disoriented, bewildered kind of thing? And if we really want to start initiating change, we have to get everybody involved. And I said, it's all about changing people. So how do we get ourselves and others to change is the key reflection that I have kind of came out of the industry at the end of my career thinking, at the end of the day, it's all about getting people to think differently and to get them to change. And as in individuals and teams, now there's certain things that we have to have in place to really want people to change. But if we can get the right culture within an organization, which I'm not going into this, I'm not a humans factors expert, but this is what everybody's talking about, human behaviors, human factors. But it all comes down to getting the right culture within an organization. And if people are giving, if we get back, this is where we've lost individual responsibility and accountability. We've lost this. We've lost people being empowered to be responsible and to be accountable. This is what you have to have in a high performing organization. And if you have these human factor elements, you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you know who's doing the job, you know you're not going to get blamed, you will be able to make a difference, a big difference. You'll be thinking positively. You'll be really genuinely trying to make things better. So, human factors, oh yeah, they play a huge part in this, but the current management systems are dragging us down in all aspects of this, and to make big changes, you have to have lots of changes, and you have to have a lot of people thinking in the same way to make this big changes. So this kind of slide summarizes where we are with our challenges. We have a skills problem within industry. We have a genuine competence problem with this industry. We've got this big crew change where people are leaving, and a new breed of graduate engineers are coming in who are academically qualified but who lack the knowledge and experience. And we're an industry who really the only lesson learned is we don't learn the lessons that we learned. So we're going to have to retrain, and virtually reinvent every single mistake and failure we've had, because we're not a good industry. We're incapable of learning, and that's the reason why our growth does not marry or match up with other industries. So we have to have a team, individuals and teams who are more capable, more empowered, and get people to be able to think for themselves, to be able to affect the change. So without this, managing lost time and high performing teams will never work. So a quick poll, and I wasn't aware that GoTo Training had a poll feature, so we'll just use the chat log. So here's a question for everybody. Basically, is where lies your greatest wealth learnings? Is it in our successes or is it in our failures? And why would you answer this way? Do you think you learn more from success, or do you think you learn more from our failures? Yeah. And the good point in here is that failure is actually success if we can learn from it. And I found this very, very good kind of representation of failure, and a really nice little acronym, that failure always invites learning. And for me, basically, I think we're stuck in the left-hand side of this illustration, And what we need to be doing is we need to be turning the apple cart upside down, like you see in the high learning potential here. We need to really be turning everything upside down and ripping it apart, and using the systems that we have, but making things for the right, doing the right things for all the right reasons is what we're needing. So we can learning from failure, and this is what I generally have experienced in many of the organizations that I have worked in. We don't really take the time and resource to learn from our failures. So they just stack up on top of us, and we're not really learning, and we're not really improving. High performing teams, on the other hand, will absolutely assure that they investigate everything that goes wrong. We're in a no blame kind of culture, and we learn. But as I said, learning is not enough. You have to guarantee that you can translate and sustain learning. is by far the hardest things to do. So when things fail within our well operations, do we have a culture where typically we're just pointing the finger at the nearest person? Everybody's just copycatting to the same self-denial and hiding behind a bunch of meaningless management metrics, which evidently exist today. And there's the reasons for this, which we'll show in this little webinar presentation. We plan to fail. Like most drilling organizations, they build non-productive time into their standard plan. What other industry does this? You think the high-performing norms, they actually build failure into their plans, or they make a plan saying this is what we can achieve if we don't have any problems on this well? So reflect on this. Other inabilities of well failure factors that exist, then feel free to put these in the chat log. So how to bridge this well's failure gap? Yeah. Well, our current state, as what we'll see, is from the case studies I've given you. There's far more opportunities to improve by learning from our losses. The things that are going wrong, the inefficiency, the ineffectiveness within our well operations, if we want to make the gains. So we want to go from the current state in the left-hand side of this illustration to the desired state in the right hand of this illustration. We're going to try to give you some of the key factors which we need for change, which I've already been mentioning in this webinar discussion, and we need to come up with an action plan from getting from the standard failing norms to a high performing norm where we're starting to learn from all the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness that exists within this. So managing lost time, basically. Okay, managing lost time. Yeah, oh, look at my little animation is working here as well. So managing lost time is debunking these well failure things by taking an evidence-based review of the losses that are resulting within our operations and making sure that we're learning from these, that we truly start to investigate and learn such that the learnings can be translated and sustained into the next set of programs, and we can start to demonstrate continuous improvement curves. The method I'm going to give you is easy, but the bigger picture is far more complex to make it happen. Because we need to be innovative. We need a strategic plan. The people at the top of our organizations need to have drilling the right wells in the right place and having the right kind of business and financial objectives. Where we're really focusing is more on the excellence of delivery in the projects that we're involved with in wells, and the key thing about this is to add value to the wells by doing things simpler, better, and more efficient. So as I said, this is an evidence-based approach. So let's start with the evidence. And getting back to those little questions I first gave you. So here's a study that the UK did in the 90s. And there's other studies that pretty much show the same kind of pyramid from other industries. And as in summary, you can see that 97% of all industrial accidents are non-injury related. So that's the fact. And this, in my experience, is exactly the same what happens within well operations. The majority in 42 years, I have never sent anybody home on a helicopter. So nobody has ever been seriously hurt on the drilling rigs that I have personally worked on. But boy, oh boy, have I seen lots of well and equipment related accidents. And these are exactly the same precursors of personal injury, but they're accidents that as an industry we refuse to recognize, analyze, identify, and do something about them. In general, the high performing companies look at these things in a very, very kind of different way. So we need a strategy to address all our well problems, and how we need to do this is simply through a different set of metrics. Because if we're not measuring things correctly, how the heck can you manage and control the running of your business? So it's the metrics that are the main driver of good management and control within well operations. And once you've truly started to hang out your dirty washing and show the mountain of problems that exist, then you have to take an approach to really learn how to investigate and get to the root causes. No, not root cause. There's no such thing as a root cause in complex well operations. It's the active and latent causes of these events. Yeah. And it's not so difficult to do if you're trained in the right kind of investigative method, which, by the way, I discovered in 2015 at the end of my career. And once you start to do this, if we measure the problems, understand the problems, manage the risks, control our loss and our waste, our ineffectiveness, our inefficiencies, then I guarantee you, because I've worked on projects that do this, you will grow, and you will start to demonstrate, continuous improvement curves within your wells. So this is the typical metrics we see on an end of well report from a well management company or from an operator. A bunch of zeros. So what does that tell us about the true underlying things that's happening on our wells in terms of safety? Well, it's zero. It's a bunch of zeros. It tells us very little, basically. And why is this so? Because we have these metrics where we're barking up the wrong tree, essentially. These, like I say, I was lucky. I worked in another industry before I got into oil and gas, and I'm not, I don't claim to be that high in intellectual intelligence, but I can see straight away that these metrics don't tell half the story of what's actually going on in our wells. So we need a completely different approach, and this is what happened in the 80s and the 90s with technical limit drilling. We started to try to measure things in a different way, to make things real, to make things evident, to tell the truth, and because this is what's important if we truly want to grow the business. So this is the typical standard norm from the last project I was on by a well management company. The planning already has non-productive time built into it, and you can see the actual delivery. We went significantly 32 days over a plan which already had failure built into it, and you can see we went over on the budget as well. But what does it really tell us that we actually can take forward and on the next well really start to improve from this? And you can see through the various different, as we broke the well into the various phases, you can see that some things went well and some things didn't go not so well. But where was the true learnings from this? And on this particular project, I was a drilling manager, but with no authority or power. And although I would like to have seen investigative reports in some of the bigger things that went wrong, it was typically business as usual. There were no investigative reports kicked off for the big things that went wrong on this well, which is the standard norm. I assure you, this is the standard norm. But because I was working for the operator, and because I still had a duty to tell them what I saw was going wrong with their well. This is the classic, the real evident truth of a well, and you can see. So this is exactly the same as what the well management were doing, but this is me trying to say, this are the things that went wrong on this well. This is the inefficiencies that existed on this well. And then you can see for each part of the well, you can do this at a project level, a phase level, a job level, or even individual task and activity. You can come up with some kind of efficiency number for everything. So why don't we do this if we truly want to have a safe, effective, efficient business? It's kind of beyond comprehension. And again, do you really think high performance companies, which way are they doing their wells? Are they building failure into their well plans, or are they taking a much more smart approach to the way they measure, manage, and control their wells? And so here's a classic a case study example from, you can see now this is a very rare kind of learning curve, continuous improvement curve through basically through a 16-year development well program. And it comes down to two things. It's about, say, making people think differently and allowing people to change, to get things right, and to do the right things and get things right first time. And you can see how the learning curve was improved, but just by using the power of people. But of course, you're going to hit this brick wall where you can't go any further. And what really step changed through the 90s was the technologies that started to come into the drilling environment. And we've made a list there, as you can see, of the technological enablers that allowed us to even take this improvement curve very further. And it says these curves, do exist in I'm sure in most regions, but they're few and far between. So why is this so? It's because high performing teams have a different kind of culture. They have a culture where people are empowered and permitted and allowed to change and allowed to take a little bit of risk. They leave no stone unturned, no matter how small, when it comes to learning. As I said, there's only two ways to learn, and I've got a slide that will show that quite later in this webinar. And then the final thing is the use of technology. I mean, there's technologies now which are 25 years old that so many companies still haven't even tried it once, and they'll be calling it new technology. But how can you call a technology new when there's already a couple of thousands applications of this, to justify the improvement and the it could add to your wells, basically. So as far as having a management lost time plan, I've kind of split it into four kind of things here, basically. Is we have to do some redefining of the way we're currently conducting our business. We have to change the way we measure. You can only manage what you're measuring, and we have to measure much more succinctly to be able to manage better, to put the controls into place, to be able to learn and to be able to improve, basically. Yeah. So our first problem starts with this is the truth. This is where the problems start. The problems are the governance and the regulations in oil and gas are insufficient. They simply set a standard that the operators don't have a need really to do anything. Let's go back to that table of a bunch of zeros. That's all we need to do. That's all the operators need to do is to make a report every year to say, a helicopter didn't fall out of the sky. We didn't have a collision. We didn't have a rig went on fire. We didn't have a blowout. These are the major accidents which are typically classified in the governance and the regulations. And of course, within wells, we have a completely different threshold of hazards that exists when it comes to the well and the equipment and the systems failures. So this is where we're failing. There is no doubt about this. I've been through a lot of the regulations. Perhaps only the Norwegian regulations are a little bit more succinct with a requirement to do this. But again, if I read the 2021 Norwegian annual safety report and I read the UK annual safety report, it's a bunch of zeros. It's telling us absolutely nothing about our wells because there is no need to. So the second thing is the operators don't have to. And the third thing is the people don't want to. And that's the primary reason why we We fail to learn from all the things that are going wrong in our wells. Now, and this is the evident truth, guys. So I've put in a few kind of a 5-point plan here of the things that we need to think about and change. And essentially, this is what high performers have done. They've identified the failings in the regulations and the standards. So they've set new standards to make sure we're capturing all the things that are going wrong within our business, within our projects, from if the project start to the project end. We're measuring the loss and the waste, the inefficiencies in a completely different way. We're comparing our loss with our standards, and we're seeing the deviations that exist. So we're continuously trying to make things better, basically. And when things are going wrong, we're making sure we truly get to the root causes of the problems. This is essentially what the technical limit was all about. I knew the guy who was working as the investigator. Every single thing that went wrong through this technical limit period at Woodside back in the 80s, Dave Torrey was the guy that investigated all the things, and he was always finding things at the end of the evidence trail to say, this is the problem, and then we need to act to correct, as needed. And as I said, learning learning by itself is not enough. The far harder part is how you translate and sustain learning. And the only way you can demonstrate this is by showing us these kind of improvement curves. And so I found some more evidence. So the UK HSC site, by the way, is one of the best go-to places you can find for things, for industrial things that are kept simple. So this is what the HSC came up with in I'm not sure the exact 2015 here, was a guide to how to better manage industrial projects. And you can see there was a 5-point plan here. Go back to your policy, don't reinvent it, just improve it. Go back to your organization, look at all the things that are going wrong with your people, with the human factors, the way you're organized, etc. And then start looking at how you're planning and delivering your wells, and start measuring. And I've the only modifications I've had here is I put in lost time. That is basically is how I see it. That is the best way to work this within your wells. So this was the 5 elements, and actually in this little guideline that they gave us, they actually gave 25 questions that an organization should be asking themselves, how they need to improve the management of their projects. So you can see the UK HSE have recognised, the problems lying in our management systems. All the Macondo learnings was there was problems in the management systems, and then so we need a new strategy. So management systems is not my domain. I'm sure there's other experts who can do this. And to be honest with you, most of the oil company management systems are okay. The problem is people just simply ignore what's written within the paperwork evidence, So we need a strategy, and high performing teams are going back and they're looking at the strategy, and all this is illustrating is that there's 4 key areas you need to be looking at. You have the customer, you have the financial aspects, you have the project aspects, the drilling, the completion, the facilities, kind of the business process aspects, and then you have is how can you make how can you continue learning and growth within all of our well projects. And you see it comes down to four kind of common themes here. It's setting the right objectives, setting the right targets, is putting the right metrics in place, and making sure you have the right initiatives to allow people to think differently and to change, I guess is the best way. So in terms of strategy, initiating, and metrics, strategies, what are we trying to achieve here? Initiating, what do we need to do in those 4 areas shown, and in the metrics, how can we measure, learn and improve, kind of thing. So I've got 3 or 4 project management slides here, which I'm just going to rattle through, because I'm just going to remind ourselves the importance of good project management. And this is what happened to me in the mid-90s. They took me off the rig, they put me into the office, and I got involved with the planning. And boy, did that give me great insight to the well when I went back to the field to drill this wildcat exploration well. I was resourced 3 or 4 months to get involved in the planning, to get involved with every single nut and bolt of that well. And what do you think happens when we go and drill the well? We drill the well as planned. Project management. It's so important in the kind of more complex wells what we're drilling. And the 4 key things I'm just going to show in these slides is you need a good project management framework. Yeah, you need to be getting everybody sitting around the table, getting involved in the project at an early planning stage. This is where the value is added. We'll have an illustration come on to show you this. So this is exactly what happened in the 90s. I was a consultant. I went into the operators' offices as a consultant. In fact, most of the project team was specialized consultants. Yeah, because the operator had made us all consultants several years earlier. So the predominant members of these team were consultants, but the key players were also the third-party company key players, the mud, the cement, the geomechanics, the geology, the geoscientists, now sitting around the same table, not being in another part of the building or in another city, sitting with us in the same part of the building, working as a multidisciplinary integrated project team. So that was the key. That was the key thing to improving project deliveries. So simple project management is essentially, what drilling wells or well projects need. We're not building a refinery or sending a shuttle to Mars or something. So but guaranteed, anything that's simple within oil and gas, we make it so complicated that nobody understands it anymore. It doesn't work. Keeping project management simple. So I'm saying, yeah, project management, yes, it really does pay dividends to have good project management from the start of a project to the end of a wells project. But it's simple. You don't need to overcomplicate this, basically. And as shown in this slide, you can see, don't ask me, I'm not the expert. This is what other industries have told our industry. Most project value gets added where? And you can see from this illustration, most project value gets added in the planning phase of the well. So this is why a lot of projects are failing. And who are the people that generally get blamed? It's the people out on the rig who had absolutely nothing to do with the planning. So why do we allow these failures to perpetuate in this way? And why are we not going back to the root sources and causes of the real roots of why projects are failing, by taking an evidence-based kind of investigative approach to show this is where, logically, this is where your projects are failing, because we know this is the opportunity for where most project value gets added. And all I can tell you is when they took us off in the rig in the 90s, and this is pretty much how I've worked all the projects I choose to work in, I get involved in the planning and I go to the rig, and then I'm part of the execution, the delivery team. It's an individual, taking certain roles and responsibilities within the project, working as a team, and then we go and we deliver as planned. And our record to date has been virtually 100%. When we do it this way, we deliver this way. So that's all I know from this kind of experience. Yeah, and again, so there's a lot of key things to think about in planning, and that's all I really want to say is project management. Keep it simple. All the industries tell us the value gets added in the beginning. And then finally, so we need some kind of working model. So this is kind of a very simplistic working model. You know, within our projects, within our wells projects, we've got to set good goals and objectives. We've got to gather that evidence. You know, the offset evidence, analog evidence, evidence from different regions to try and improve. That the purpose is to try to make things safer, better, faster, cheaper, whatever. And you can see we kind of go through this, but at the end of the day, it comes down to only two things. You know, you're either things are going to go wrong or things are going to go right. And how and you know what are the key metrics of things going right is to have the benefits and the outcomes and the value that you want to be getting from your wells. So it comes down to either you're meeting these objectives or things are going wrong. You know, you're losing because things are going wrong within your well programs and projects, or there's inefficiencies that exist. And as I said, based on the current metrics, you know, you're not even going to be putting yourself into the ballpark. So manage lost time really is in summary, it's these four simple things. It's about taking a far more evidence-based approach to the data that we have and learning from this, and then trying to apply this in a much better way in our future wells programs. It's about starting to truly understand our problems. Yeah. Before you start talking about risks, if you've done a risk management course, you must realize that the first thing you have to do is understand the problems. And the second thing is then you have to make a prioritized list of the problems before you can start associating the risks, and then, you know, doing whatever kind of qualitative or semi-quantitative kind of number crunching to your risks, and then to try to put the mitigations in place to make things as low as reasonably practical. And then it's about, when you go to the delivery of your wells, it's about managing these risks, and then finally it's about, you know, being in control. And you only have two options here. You can either be in control or you can lose control. is essentially the summary slide, which will come up within the end here. So as I said, it's an evidence-based approach, you know. So you know, and this is typically what the oil and gas industry is good at, you know. So does this feel familiar in your kind of experiences? And the reality is we need to be taking, you know, a more kind of, you know, a modern, investigated, non-biased approach, you know. When things are going good, you know, it's like the Swiss cheese. We need to be more proactively picking up on all the little things that are going wrong and reacting to these quickly, and then going through, you know, a more careful evidence kind of approach, getting to the causes, correcting the actions, you know, avoiding things going wrong, and making sure this is sustainable. So this is the kind of little loop we should be going through. But typically our industry, we end up going into, you know, we just put a sticking plaster on this. We don't really do any investigation. We take a very biased kind of investigation approach to this, and we don't really, we're not learning in the right way from our things that are going wrong, basically. And you know, I'm not going through this, but you know, hazard reduction, you know, risk management, basically, you know, this is essentially just a few kind of illustrations I put together to remind us what it's about. And it is, you know, risk management is the key. You know, if we in control of all the things that are going wrong, all the inefficiencies that exist, our risks are going to be far lower. You know, our risks are going, if our risks are much higher, then we're going to experience, you know, more things going wrong in our wells, more things failing is essentially the metric. And you can see how these three key elements are linked together, basically, and that's the easiest way to see kind of well projects. So the second thing now, so the metrics. So you can see I've tried to talk through, you know, a strategy, you know, basically, you know, kind of a new logic to thinking of how to manage our wells. Basically, some of the initiatives of what we need to do, and then the key thing is you know, we have to kind of measure differently. And I said, this is what we did 20 years ago, based on you know, what had already resulted with these kind of technical limit, and you know, looking at what they do in these other kind of high performing kind of companies, you know. And again, the secret is to keep it simple, you know, and it's not just about measuring your old wells. It's about trying to be a bit more innovative and creative to see how you can, you know, introduce new things into your wells, and trying to put some metrics to improve things even further. You know, always go back to the customer or the stakeholders, asking them exactly what are you wanting and what are you trying to achieve here. You know, and as I said, you always base your goals and objectives on the evidence. You know, don't be, you know, trying to preach something that just simply does not evidently exist. You know, why are we putting 90 days to drill a well when the reality is we could really be drilling these wells in 20 days if we cut out all the crap, and that's what basically we have proved this on several occasions through the life of these kind of wells. And the important thing is because we're trying to learn, we're trying to change, we're trying to adopt, we're trying to adapt, because the ultimate goal here is to learn through change, to improve and to prove our business. So this essentially what management is kind of my C principle. So this is my 3 C principles that I concluded at the end of my career. This is how I see well operations. The first thing is safety is associated with being in total control of loss. You know, if things are not going wrong, you're creating a much safer environment where you know, the well's not going to get into problems, your equipment's not going to get into problems, and the people are going to be far less likely to get injured or harmed. You know, being effective is making sure that in the planning, through the project development, to the execution, to the project closeout, you're doing all the right things. It's what being effective is about within your projects. And then what's being efficient is making sure you're doing all the right things right first time. You know, and the big advantage we have today now that you know, we have in this digital world now, and all the information we're getting back from our wells, you know, we have all this real-time data which we should be able to utilize to make sure that when we're seeing these little deviations starting to occur, we should be able to more proactively, you know, jump onto these and take control to make sure that we're not getting into the inefficiencies that existed, you know, when we didn't have these kind of tools or technologies through the 80s and 90s, and we can see lots of examples of this. And of course, the whole smart thing is, you know, we have to be more specific. This slide is actually about setting smart objectives, but it's the same kind of smart principles we can apply to almost any aspect of our wells projects. It's about being more specific. It's about, you know, really starting to measure things in a far more meaningful, real, evident, true way. It's assigning things, you know, risks, you know. I look at risk matrices, and do I see on the matrix who is owning the risk, who is managing the risk? So if you don't assign something to somebody, you know, it means nobody is responsible or accountable for anything, you know. And the final things is to, you know, always try to be realistic, you know, make it so, you know, this is real. This is real, and you can't get anything more real than just, you know, taking a more evidence-based approach kind of thing. And then time-based, basically. So managing lost time itself, you can see this is, and perhaps the problem I've always had selling this to management, it's too simple. And this has always been, this is, I don't want to make it any complicated, because we know we always want to keep it simple. But in any kind of well project, this is what we have. We have our productive time, and then we have the things that are going wrong, which we call our non-productive time. But there's much more than this. Non-productive time generally only what gets reported. You know, don't think that all non-productive time gets reported, because it doesn't. But within the wells data that we have streaming to the rigs today, it's a lot easier to show what is getting reported and what is not getting reported. So certainly today, with the information we have, we can make far better use of the information to be more reflective on the real, evident and true extent of non-productive time. And then what everybody calls the invisible lost time, the inefficiencies that exist. We in our plan, we said it was going to take 12 hours to rig up a BOP, but it took us 24 hours. How are we measuring, capturing and recording this? And a lot of this tends to get missed. So none of this is new. None of this is new. This is all really a replication of what was done in the technical limit drilling and everything else. But if we add up all the loss and waste, this is the reality. This is what you could achieve if you eliminate the things that go wrong and the inefficiencies that exist within most wells operation. And the reality is the non-productive time we see reported is only a small fraction of the reality of the loss and waste that physically exists. So this is how simply we remeasured wells starting. So when I did my MSc dissertation in the late 90s, I looked at all the technical limit and all the work that was done by the various SP papers written with everything else, and this was the kind of metrics I evolved and the metrics I have used for the last 20 odd years for my customers. So irrespective of what they're doing within their electronic reporting systems, I take the daily drilling reports and I remeasure the wells in this way. And I'll explain this. The first thing is the significant lost time events have to be taken out of the main well time. These are big things that have went wrong. And according to the company policy, these are events which should be investigated. Yeah, and so this leaves you the productive time, which is more evident and more real when it comes to day-to-day operations. So within the day-to-day productive time that's left, taking all the big events out, you can now start to see the day-to-day smaller things that go wrong and the inefficiencies that existed. And the bottom line is if you want to see the efficiency of your well operations, is simply the managed time that's left divided by the total well time. And we'll give you an example. So for example, we got a 100-day well, of which 75 days was productive, and we had 25 days of big things going wrong on our well. Maybe a BOP failure, maybe a stuck pipe incident, maybe lost circulation. These are the big things that tend to go wrong on our wells, that by most company policies are big accidents that should be fully investigated, such that we learn and we translate learning into future projects, so we can prevent these things from happening. Of course, then what you're left with is the 75 days, which you can then analyze more on a like-for-like basis. So you can start to see now on a day-to-day basis now, where the true efficiencies and effectiveness of all the other things that are happening on the rig on a day-to-day basis. And typically you can see, there's all the little smaller things that go wrong. The shale shakers get plugged and you lose a few hours. A valve breaks down, the pump breaks down. You have a little bit of tight hole, so you lose a bit of time pulling out the hole, having to ream through a section, etc., on a smaller scale. And then there's all the inefficiencies that exist, which generally are never captured. But certainly today, more and more organizations are starting to realize the benefits now of starting to look at the invisible lost time, which I call the waste that exists within your well operations. So you can see what the drilling efficiency of this, and this is the evident truth. So for the last 20 years on the offshore wells I measure in this way, that's the number, you know. And the non-productive time you're generally going to see is basically significantly less. So that's the truth today. The truth today is most wells get measured with 16 or something non-productive time, a quite meaningless metric. If you use these three simple metrics, as I've shown, basically this is the end result. You will start to see a mountain of opportunities to be able to improve the safety, the effectiveness, the efficiency of your business. And you know, one of the Petro Teach guys was talking about a well we drilled in 2015, and so here's the man who's lost time. As I said, so I'm not kidding you here. This is how I do it. This is what was presented to the operator at the end of the well. They had their non-productive figure, which was significantly less than my lost time metrics that I've applied. And you can actually see here, and you have to be able to. Not only do we measure the loss and waste for offshore wells, there's three categories of loss that exist. There's waiting time, there's equipment failure, and then there's wellbore problems. And this is the significant lost time events that happened on this well. And you can see here, this is the equipment failure, this is the wellbore failure. So you can see there was no significant wellbore failure on this well. So the drilling part of the well, the physical turning to the right and making a hole and tripping out of the well, you can see there was no major failure event here. You can see on the equipment side, there was two significant lost time events, which really we should be gathering the evidence and doing an investigation to truly try to get to the root of these problems. And the waiting on weather time was a risk, it was a hazard and risk we identified, because we took a drill ship to spud a well in September in the Norwegian Sea. You know, so this was a risk that we already kind of told the operator, this is the last thing you want to be doing. This is a big risk. And you can see measuring this way, you can quite clearly see basically exactly, you know, the major outcome of doing exactly what we predicted would happen, kind of thing. So this is where the significant time was lost on this particular well. It was all the time we had to spend waiting on weather, because we're trying to drill an exploration well in the Norwegian Sea, spudding in September. And you can see there's all kind of ways you can do this from these. Once you have the wells data and you put them into the right compartments, you can break it down, and you can take it down to this is a high level. You can take it down to the job level, casing, cementing, or you can even take it down to individual tasks and activities. So on a much bigger scale, you can really start to micromanage your business in a much different way. And I'm going to let you into a secret. That's how the high performing companies do it. They don't work in days and hours. They work actually sometimes as low as kind of minutes and seconds for all the tasks and activities they are doing. And let's go back to that earlier slide. It's lots of people doing lots of smaller things can make a significant difference to the bottom line on your wells. And just to show you I'm not going through these in detail, but you can see this is what managing lost time is about. You take your electronic wells data, and you get somebody competent to read through it to come up with a simple 1 page kind of Excel kind of report, which shows what is real, evident, and true about these wells. So you're not going to see 16% non-productive time. You're going to see extremely high levels of inefficiency and ineffectiveness within the wells. And once you have identified the opportunities of what you can do better, then, as I said, it's about getting the right kind of culture within your organization to allow people to think differently and to affect change. And you can see here, so you see 30 days on this well, but if we eliminate the loss and waste, this well could physically have been drilled in 13 days. You can see on this particular well, 74 days. You look at all the loss and waste on the well, you can see this well could have physically been 50% efficient. Yeah, more than 50 on this one. It's almost like, even less. It's more, almost 60% inefficient on these wells. Yeah. And a final one here, this is from a big kind of data set I looked at, and you can, and then yes, you've got to look at all the other things that you have to add. I said my metrics are simple, but as soon as you give this to intellects, they're going to make everything more and more complicated. And so you can do this. Yes, you can apply well complexity indexes to your well. You can look at the different types of rigs you were using. And then you can even go to look at this rig had a different top drive. Yes, you can do all these other things as well. And all you're doing is taking this data to the next kind of level. And in this particular field development, you can see I split the wells because I'm drilling production wells and I'm drilling injection wells. So I split them. And you can see basically from the 4 injection wells, we ended up with 85 days of significant lost time events or total lost time events. And you can see on the production wells, where there were 7 wells we had there. So you can see the loss on the injection wells was 20 days per well. The loss on the production wells were almost 30 days per well, which is kind of understandable because the injection wells are generally less complex wells, which you should be expected to drill more efficiently. But the key messages here, look at the level of loss and waste that existed. And again, the magic number appears again. It's not 16% as the operator shows. The real evident truth of these wells, the inefficiency and ineffectiveness that exists by drawing lines in the sand and measuring everything, is basically a significant a significantly higher quotient. And then finally, basically, as I said, I included this slide because today you have real-time systems, which is the catalyst now to reduce your loss and waste when you drill wells. Because if you and the secret is getting back to the planning. The better you can make your predictions and your models and everything else, the more accurate and precise you can make these. As soon as you start to see deviations occurring, you can quickly get on board and you should be able to stop things going wrong on your wells. And so this is the tools that you have now. And you can see basically, you can see again, just from this slide I've taken from Drill Sage, which is an incredibly kind of innovative real-time advisory system. You can see basically they're saying that that they replayed their wells, so they replayed all the wells data, and they showed that if you were using a real-time advisory system, this is potentially the kind of savings you could have had on your using these kind of systems by being able to pick up on the historical kind of problems that have existed. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, drilling a well comes down to it comes down to time, it comes down to mass length and time. That's what drilling is all about: mass length and time. If you understand mass length and time, a weight indicator, a torque indicator, a pressure indicator, cuttings coming over the shakers, you should be able to then in the LWD and the MWD information coming up, you should be able to make better decisions. And that's why I included this slide, because the technologies we have today, which we didn't have in the past, are really enablers to reduce the loss and waste that exists on these wells. So we can have a quick kind of poll here. It's basically, so all the kind of failures that are happening on your wells, the equipment failures, the well bore failures, the people errors of judgment, uh, people onshore making bad decisions for the people offshore, all these kind of human factors, the physical factors, and then the paperwork factors. The drillers do something, because there's absolutely nothing written in the drilling engineer's well report about the geomechanics or the mud weights or the gas levels expected or the ROPs information A, B, C, and D. So all these things which then lead us to having these big things going wrong in our wells. And the question I've got is how many investigation reports do we see at the end of the well for this? Despite what the company policy might state, so how many significant loss investigation reports do you really see from all these case studies I've showed you? How many investigation reports do you think I can find? And here lies the problem to our wells. It's because you're going to find very few. Say on that project I looked at, there was 185 significant lost time events on a 48 well data set I found. I could find less than 5 reports, which is contrary to what the policy of the company policy says, because it says all incidents should be reported. So where we are at this stage is there's a mountain of problems which we are not resolving because we don't measure right, we don't investigate, we don't learn. So how can I say that's the easy part? By the way, going through wells data to show you the mountain of problems, that's the easy part, and learning is by far the hardest part. So as I said, you're not going to drill world-class projects if you simply don't have the right culture within your company. A high-performing culture is very different to the standard kind of oil field organization that exists today. I know, I've been there. I'm lucky as a consultant. I can pick, or I could pick and choose, and I was always going to try to work for the companies that I could see. So if they were asking me questions for hiring me, I'd be asking them the same questions back if they had the right culture. And I have on a few occasions joined the project, and within 3 or 4 weeks I've said, man, no, I just can't be here. I just cannot work this way. And I've kind of gracefully left the project because it was not the right kind of culture that I wanted to work in. We need to have much more compliant work processes and systems. There's a lot of the time there's nothing wrong with our management systems. We simply do not comply with them. That is this industry problem. And if I track back a little bit, it's because the governments don't make us. The operators don't have to, and then the people really don't want to. So that's the truth about oil and gas. Unlike other industries, the automobile industry, for example, anytime a crash or there's a collision, that has to be reported. It has to be investigated because there's insurance and there's all kinds of other things in place there. A clear-cut decision-making and structure, and that's what I said. This was the worst thing that happened to me in my career. In 1988, the operator put me on a 5-day practical loss control leadership course, and I went, wow, yes, this is it. This is exactly how I'm going to conduct my work as a supervisor an engineer in the field. And guess what? Man, I kept hitting so many barriers for people not wanting to work like other industries do. So that's the problem. I was put on the right course, but I was never allowed the opportunity to be empowered to apply this kind of practical loss control leadership skills, which has been going on now for 40, 50 years in other industries. So sadly, our industry is way behind other industries when it comes to simple loss control management. But in the occasions where I am empowered and I have been allowed to take responsibility and I have been able to use loss control principles, guess what happens? We absolutely rip wells apart, and because we don't have problems, and it's easier to sell. It's easy for me to sell on the rig. What do you mean by this loss control, Peter? We're going to do the right things. We're going to get things right first time. We're going to stay out of trouble. Oh yeah, we like the sound of that. And as soon as the driller's not having to back them out of hole and the logs are going straight to ground, everybody's happy, and the customer's happy, the financial manager's happy, the business objectives are all getting met, and everybody is happy as well. And to do this, as I said, you've got to have people made of the right stuff. The high-performing companies are looking for people who have the right kind of emotional intelligence to be high-performing, who are not frightened to do things differently, who are not frightened to take kind of risks. And I can only re-emphasize, learning is not enough. The hardest part by anything is when something goes wrong, is how do you demonstrate that that learning has been acted upon, corrected, and improved. Learning is only learning if you can truly demonstrate you're not having these kind of problems, and preferably you're actually going to take it the next step further and improve it. I'm not going into this slide. This is just a generic slide I have for you to look at around those kind of 5 points as an example. So this cultural thing. So I've kind of summarized this. As I said, this is what happened in the 90s. All the oil companies were underperforming. The small medium-sized companies that were running their business in a different way, were drilling wells, by a factor of 2 or 3 better. And so the operators knew they had to change. So they formed these multidisciplinary teams. They brought in specialists, consultants who knew what they were doing, made of the right stuff, who were allowed to put these metrics in place and at a very early planning stage to make sure no stone was left unturned, to see all the opportunities that existed, to see all the problems that existed in these offset wells, and to make a delivery. For example, the best offset well was 30 days, and the plan we make is 15 days. We say, no, we can do better than this. This is all the reasons why these wells took 30 days. If you make all these improvements and you have everybody sitting around the table and you discuss all these things and everybody agrees, yeah, this is adding value to the project and to the company, and we come up with a 15-day plan, or sometimes we have to concede. We have to accept on this particular well, yeah, we have to run the LWD because we can see the value from getting this information, but it's being managed in a much more measured, managed, controlled fashion. And so we're having this, which makes, which is really starting to tick all the kind of boxes of practical loss control leadership. It's about staying out of problems. It's about ticking all the right boxes from a time, a cost, a quality, HSE kind of perspective, and basically measuring everything. So we have the old culture that you will see in many organizations today, and all the failures that just pile up and they don't really learn. They're drilling the same well with the same casing with very little change over the last 20, 30 years. And then you see these new kind of cultures which they're innovating, they're creating, they're learning from all these things where either things have failed or things are not going as effectively or efficiently as they would like, or they can see that they're getting their butts kicked by the operators who are starting to do things in a different, more technological advanced way. And as I said, to me, it comes down to 2 simple things. Take a more loss control leadership approach to your wells. Truly understand the loss the practical safety leadership controls that you need to have integrated into your management systems. Yeah, and it's actually it's not as difficult to do as you think. Most of it's already there. To implement loss control into an existing management system is not that a difficult thing to do. But the big changes you need is you need to start training your workforce in truly how to learn from things that are going wrong, and as I said, at the end of my career, for me personally, nobody had really given me the opportunity to do this. So basically, you can see what happened. This had been on my wish list. I could see that everywhere I was going, and I was a consultant. I would say to operator, do we want to kick off an investigation for this? Do you want me to start gathering the evidence? And it was like it was all hushed over, and we just stick a piece of plaster on, and we move on, and we never learn from these big things or even smaller things that are going wrong. So as you can see, I discovered a method in 2015. I went to Alaska, and I'm telling you, this was the best learning experience I had. But sadly, it was 35 years too late for me. And if I had been given this training and I had been working in the right kind of culture and the right kind of organization, boy, wouldn't we have been able to translate and sustain learning and to improve things much more better. And then the final thing is, as I said, is demonstrating improving, And when acting on improvement choices, you've either got two things. You're either going to make the right choices or you're going to make the wrong ones, And how do you know you're making the right ones? Is you should be seeing a demonstrable improvement in your wells. Yeah. And it's not necessarily you're drilling them cheaper, because you might be getting much more production out of the well. Remember, it's not always about time and cost. Sometimes you're better to spend a little bit more time on a well, spend more money if you're adding more value. And that's where you are today. With the tools and technologies you have today, particularly drilling, there's so many times you can drill yourself into a problem because the bits and the motors and the muds you have can easily drill yourself into a problem. So you have to have a much greater understanding to where your limits are, in a lot of aspects in well operations today. And it doesn't matter what kind of well operations you have. Basically, there's only two ways you can improve your wells process. As I said, through lots of little changes or through some kind of radical kind of technology change, basically. And here's kind of a nice little kind of illustration I found off the web, basically, of a classic kind of process and flow for well process improvement kind of thing. And of course, continuous improvement, well, you don't need to make it any more complicated than the Deming kind of cycle. And again, you can see that all these things that I've talked about in this webinar, you can see, again, the HSE, straight from the HSE website. I keep telling you, this is the best place to go if you want to start understanding, how to run a safer, better business. Just go to the UK HSE website. They keep everything nice and simple. And you can see all these things I've been talking about, re-looking at your policy, improve the planning, your hazard, your risk management, or better organization, the delivery of making a good plan, then delivering a good plan by the checks and balances that you need to have, which has to be much more precise and accurate than the classic kind of NPT and the coding systems and the failing reporting methods that we have today. This is where we're failing, in the check. And I said the only good thing in our favor is that the drilling supervisors or the completion supervisors, the production guys, or the work over the well, the intervention guys, they're generally putting the truth down within their daily drilling reports. So as long as we can get our hands on this, we can filter out, and we can truly see the levels of inefficiencies and opportunities that are to do better. And then the final part, as I says, then you've got to be able to act on this, by reviewing all these metrics, reviewing the things that are going wrong, and then trying to make sure that you're translating and sustaining that learning. So as I said, managing lost time, it really is quite simple. It's about running your well projects to be totally in control, and you can either lose control or you can take control. And today you have in this technological world, you have far more tools at your fingertips to make you be able to be more in control of your well operations. So if you're not being able to make improvements, there is something fundamentally going wrong with the way you're kind of conducting your business, kind of thing. So pretty much we haven't been too much over time, which is good. So the final thing here is, in summary,